More than 1,000 passengers and crew perished when the CPR liner, the Empress of Ireland, sank in the St. Lawrence River 72 years ago. That terrible tragedy now goes almost unnoticed. The New Canadian Encyclopedia uses only 11 lines to describe it, yet the sinking of the Empress of Ireland is the biggest sea disaster in Canada's history. The Empress is still at the bottom of the St. Lawrence off Rimouski's shore. The precise spot is unmarked and known only to the scuba divers who risk their lives in the vicious currents to take from the wreck whatever it has to offer. There is one survivor of that disaster more than 70 years ago, and to her, the Empress of Ireland still offers memories as vivid as yesterday. Every year since 1914, the Salvation Army comes to Toronto's Mount Pleasant Cemetery to play a death march and remember. 167 of their members perished on their way to a congress in England when the Empress of Ireland sank in the St. Lawrence. Grace Martyn is 80 now, but she and her husband Marty seldom miss a memorial service. Grace's parents were among the dead. Her father was the bandmaster. Even though she was only 8 years old, she will never forget that voyage. May 29th, 1914, 4:24 p.m. As the band plays God Be With You Till We Meet Again, the Empress sails from Quebec City. Grace recalls that the Titanic, which sank only 2 years before, was still on everyone's lips. After supper, she's afraid to sleep near a porthole. She knows that's where the water would rush in. The Empress is a majestic ship, 3 football fields in length, carrying 1,060 passengers, a crew of 415, and $1 million in silver. 1:30 in the morning. The captain of the Empress orders a go slow when another ship is sighted in the fog. The Empress is halfway down the St. Lawrence off Rimouski. An official inquiry later heard a tale of confused signals and incompetent sailing. But to this day, no one is certain how a coal ship, the Storstad, suddenly came out of the fog, striking the Empress like a knife between the ribs. When it pulled out, the river flooded in.
The first thing that woke us up was just like almost like a firecracker going past the porthole. And we didn't know what it was. And we got out of bed. Very little was said. And somebody at this moment knocked at our door. And we went out, as we were, and got up to the deck. And we had quite a bit of difficulty getting up because the boat was listing. And hanging on to the railing, we managed to make the stairs. And we just sat there and waited. We couldn't use lifeboats. It wasn't time. 14 minutes. Wasn't time to do very much. Oh, everything was quiet. I think people were praying. I thought that I was with my mother and father. The three of us, I thought, landed in the water together. And it seemed like I was sort of, my father was floating and I was on top of him. And then I was there on this wreckage alone. And I could see a couple of lifeboats. And I remember calling help. And one came over. And I got in.
Are you okay? Take your time.
The first thing I wanted was my mother. And they, of course, tried to calm me down. When my mother wasn't there, I remember I really didn't want to stay in the boat because if she wasn't there, I didn't want to be there.
When did you really know that your parents were dead?
I realized my father was because I saw him at the undertaker's. But my mother's body was never found. And I just couldn't accept it. I've had it for probably over a year that she was really gone. I used to think, going along the street, that I might run into her.
Grace Martyn's mother and father were among the 1,012 passengers and crew killed. Some were immediately crushed on the deck. Some died of hypothermia in the icy water, but most were entombed below. The CPR placed this memorial at the site of a mass grave in Rimouski. The company salvaged the silver, wrote off the ship, and destroyed the records. This was the worst peacetime disaster in Canadian history. There were few VIPs aboard. The Empress carried mostly middle-class Canadians, and the news quickly disappeared from the headlines as World War I broke out. Parts of this story are remembered in places like this two-room museum near Rimouski, which operates on a small federal grant. As a little girl, do you recall seeing any of this stuff on board? The fog bell and other items on display were brought up by treasure hunters. Many pieces are in private collections around the world. There are no laws preventing sports divers from taking whatever they please from the wreck, including this exhibit in a corner of the Rimouski Museum, the skull of an Empress passenger.